Hey, Trails Collective, Ian here with the weekly rundown for May 13th. This week's episode is brought to you by my mom, because without her, none of this would be happening. And it was a good opportunity this past weekend to spend a little bit of time with you actually hiking or on a trail. So I really valued that time, and thanks for everything. So the weekly rundown, bringing you a little bit about what's gone on in our region, in the trail network this past week, and a little bit of looking ahead what's coming. This will be Ellie and I weighing in again this week and really reaching out to encourage any of you out there. If you've got events or thoughts, anything you want to share with us, for sure send it our way. Whether it's people to reach out to, whether it's events to try to cover, FKTs to mention, things happening in your community that might just be worth sharing, for sure let us know, and we'd love to try to include it. Also, for of all of you out there, if you want to make a short video about your thoughts or something running related, for sure send it our way, and we'll let you know whether we can plug it in as well. So a little bit, at least some of the social media threads were fairly quiet this week. Maybe just one of note. There was a AJW's Taproom article on I Run Far. For those of you, I'm assuming most people out there that are listening at the moment are aware of I Run Far. If not, go check it out. Started up by Brian Powell, Virginia, years and years ago. He's based in Utah now, but a really amazing collective of individuals. AJW's, Andy Jones Wilkins, is one of those really regular contributors. So his one of the contributions this week is on classic ultras, and he lays out a bit of that on Massanutten. I've got some, I guess, personal affection for MMT and Virginia Happy Trails. That was my first as an entrant foray into the ultra running world. I had my first 100-mile attempt down there. I think it was around probably 2000 or 2001, or I don't know, somewhere in those years. I didn't finish. I think I ended up dropping at 82 with my legs just completely spastic, and I couldn't go on in that moment. It was my first event, I think, race out of college over I think probably an 8K. I was fairly speedy, relatively speedy in college. Hadn't necessarily gone that long. I paced the Hurt 100 a couple years when I lived in Hawaii for a bit, which was a wonderful experience. But my first as an entrant was MMT. So I left that with the Quality Visitors Award rock, which I still have here. We're launching the Trails Collective website this week, and in the some of the shop photos and just staging some of the product, I'm using the rock there. So for sure means a lot to me, and even though I didn't finish that one and I haven't gone back to finish it, I thought it was a wonderful experience. So it definitely represents a lot of what's good about trail and ultra, and particularly the history. So check it out. I Run Far, AJW's Taproom article there. So on the FKT boards, and here as we get back into the racing season, we'll be plugging in on results of races that happened the prior week and some races that are coming up. For those of you who check out the website this week, we do have, I think I have one of the most comprehensive race calendars that I'm aware of, and that was part of the mission of the website, set out and laid out on that. If you're an event director or no event directors, you'll have the opportunity to basically claim your race like some other sites do, and add some color to it, add some paragraphs, add some photos. We'll have a filterable search there. But that's all to say that that was prior to the year of 2020, COVID, the year of COVID. So the race calendar is kind of a mess on there at the moment. It was supposed to be really accurate, but then races all over got canceled, pushed back. So it's nuts. But in any case, that was supposed to be a core feature, still there, but that'll take some reworking. So again, if you have a race, look for it, and then claim that, and let us know, or let the community know if it's pushed back or an alternate date or what that looks like. But in lieu of having some race results, we're still covering the FKT Boards, which in effect becomes some of the race boards of the week. And I think this has been pretty fun, so I think we'll continue to stick with it even once the race season starts up. So let's go through in some of the states here and on who is active. Wasn't all Connecticut versus the world this week. I think some of the other trail networks are coming alive now that we're getting out of some of the wet season. So let's start with in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, Buzzards Mountain, call it the Marathon, took the focus this past weekend with a solid women's mark set as well as a solid men's mark that was lowered a bit. On the women's side, Katie O'Regan, despite a wrong turn in the mix, started off pretty hot and hung on for a really solid benchmark of 4:08. I'll try to plug a photo here of Katie. Some of you in the Pennsylvania trail scene and road scene for sure will know her. And it seems like that mark maybe will stick around a bit. On the men's side, Michael Heimes, which many of you know as well, after I think getting lost in the opening 2 miles and running an opening 2 miles really hard, returned to start it again. Nothing like getting lost 2 miles in there. But he shaved just a minute off of Jim Blandford's time. He came in and time from just earlier in this year, so already a competitive route there. He finished in 3:52. He dug a little bit into segment details, comparing him and Blandford, and found that at one point, well, actually with 3.5 miles to go, was 4 minutes behind, and just laid into it. Running, I don't know whether it was a 5:20 mile in the mix or part of a mile, but in any case, he was flying to dip under. So, Michael, good to see you back. Your body running healthy. So, yeah, man, nice work. In Connecticut, continues to be pretty active. The Aspetuck Trail, a 12-mile segment with 1,000 feet of gain, has been one of the more active segments in our region this year so far. It saw both the women's and men's times lowered yet again. On the women's front, it was Elizabeth Campbell. She dropped the women's time to 1:52, and Tucker Grose on the men's to 1:37. The Livingstons, who many of you know, whether you're in our region or not, with Scott and Debbie, they threw down together on the 18-mile Nautchaug Trail, with Debbie posting a baseline women's unsupported time of 2:59, and Scott chipping away and only a 3-week-old mark of 7 minutes to 2:39. Livingston's, nice work. In Maine, Nicholas Cornell lowered the mark on the 9-mile Astrogogan Riverland State Park to 1:17. In Maryland, Margaret Smith set a women's supported mark of 7:53 on the 41-mile York Heritage County and Northern Central Rim Trail. In Massachusetts, the race season is for sure kicking. And this was kind of cool to see the progression here. We covered Ian Ridgway's, I think, benchmark or first route set just a matter of weeks ago here in one of our earlier weekly rundowns. Just, I think, 3 weeks later, and his opening time was 2:14 on March 14th. Ben Nephew wanting to relive the finish line here from Breakneck Point just a few years ago, where he and Ian just threw down to a really just awesome finish to be at and watch and see that day. Ben went out just a few weeks later and lowered Ian's time to 2:09. And now just 5 weeks later, Ryan Williams showed the geezers what's up with a 1:58 hammering. In Ohio, Stephen England, New York Stephen England, which is why I'm mentioning it in Ohio, set a mark on the 25-mile Mohican Mountain Bike Trail in 3:24. New York, Scott Greger established a new mark for what looks like a really beautiful route being called the Lake Gorge 12ster in 13 hours and 11 minutes. And the route covers 40 miles over 12 peaks with over 9,000 feet of gain around Lake George. For those of you who maybe have been in that area around Lake George, between the Hudson Valley and the Adirondacks, it's a really beautiful area. So I imagine that route is pretty spectacular. New Hampshire. Looks like the trail season is kicking off a bit, maybe a little bit more access to trails. Dan Grip, who we just mentioned last week, roared back from a solid effort to set a new unsupported mark of 8:24 on the Nautchaug Nautchaug Trail. Eric Harbeck set the men's unsupported mark of 10:48 over the 58-mile Northern Rim Trail. And Ryan Kempsard lowered the mark on an original Ben Nephew tight and beautiful route as well on the Monadnock double, triple, and quad traverse to 2:09. So nice work, Ryan. And then in Virginia, Ryan Pelletier set the virgin mark for the 25-kilometer Mills Creek Turkey Pen route in 3:42. So that's a bit about what's been shaken on the competitive front, so to speak. And Ellie, let us know what's happened in the podcast world.
Hey Trails Collective, Ellie here, and let's talk about some podcasts. First, as always, we're going to start with the Cultra Trail podcast from Connecticut Trail and Ultra. They put out a slew of podcasts this past week, so buckle up and let's get going. The first one is a long-form interview with me. So if you haven't heard me talk enough, we actually go deeper into my past, my history, and I find that when people interview me a lot, we discuss, rightly so, the last 5 or 6 years of my running. But Art asked really deep and probing, thought-provoking questions, and we went deep into my childhood. And it was raw and it was honest, but I really, really felt heard by the end. So if you want to listen to more of me and learn about little Ellie, tune into that one. They started interviewing their community. So they're calling it Culture Personalities. So they have 3 interviews. One is with Michelle Pom Pom O'Neill, then Chippity Chip Chip Howard, and then Ben with 2 N's Griffin. They talk to all of these people for about a half an hour, and it sort of just goes back into their history, how long they've been running, why they support Connecticut Trail and Ultra, and then getting the whole team together is always just a hoot. So a very fun interview series. The next one is so I loved these podcasts. I'm so happy that I rediscovered Jay's podcast, The Pain Cave, because the past couple have just been great. He has a wonderful interviewing voice, and his episodes are so thought out. Like, Chris and I really should think about this a little bit deeper than for when we're preparing for our episodes. So Jay put out 2 last week, and the running nerd in me was so happy because it was their favorite running books. So Jay's joined by his friend, coach, and author Joe Polio to go through their favorite running books about running. It's a 2-part episode, so 2 hours of them talking about books. It was, I was in heaven. It was great. They cover their favorite biographies, memoirs, science and training books, and running fiction. So I think they might have stolen this idea from Chris and I from last week, but of course, Jay just takes an idea and does it a million times better than anybody else could. So my takeaways, a few that stood out to me that I loved and that they talked about were Let Your Mind Run by Dina Castor. When you pick it up, you're like, this is kind of just gonna be like a fluffy, just about my life and how I became the best American distance runner in forever, but it actually was really good for psychological and motivation, mental tricks. She talks about baking, which was great, but really what I took away from that book was just all the ways that she could have let her previous success and then just having a slump and then coming back, and her work with Joe V. Hill and just all the mental tricks. Just the book is just teeming with these wonderful things that you can take away from your own training. So highly, highly recommend that book. The next one, Eat and Run and North by Scott and Jenny Jurek. I enjoyed these when they first came out. Eat and Run was one of the first books after Finding Ultra that I read when I was getting into running. And Joe and Jay sort of dive into Scott's personality and how it doesn't seem, a lot of his books are he's juggling with like the purpose of his life, and which he probably is, and that actually sounds like the kind of guy he is. And then they talk about whether the loneliness of the long distance runner and us runners being a little bit more reserved and introverted, how sponsorship and money has played into us telling our story more. And I think my personal opinion is that if Scott wasn't as good as he is, or aligned with like Cliff Bar and all these other companies, he would be more of a private person. But and he probably would have ran the Appalachian Trail anyway. But he also, in order to pay his bills, needs to tie money into it. So that was a very honest and open discussion. I enjoyed listening to that. They talked about The Lore of Running by Tim Noakes, which is a textbook. And like Jay, I have not read the whole thing cover to cover, but piecemealing it is really the way to go for that one. Regardless of what you think about Tim Noakes and his interesting theories, he does present a lot of science, and he talks about the central governor versus lactate threshold training, and it's a very, very wise book to have on your shelf for reference. And then the last one that they talked about, which I just read this book recently, is The 4-Minute Mile by Roger Bannister, and then contrasting that with The Perfect Mile, which is more of a storybook about he and Landy going after this 4-minute mile. And I always felt this too. Bannister goes after the 4-minute mile as more of a science experiment, and he sort of just, it shows in him only training for a half an hour a day. It seems very manageable, but also he was calculated and a very, very British about it, I guess I would say. Whereas Landy was extremely emotional, running 120 miles a week, just very different approaches to the same goal. I loved this podcast, so please check it out. It was great. A few now that I haven't read, but now are on my list, are Duel in the Sun. Alberto Salazar taking on someone else that I should know that I forgot, so I will read the book. And then Running with the Buffaloes, I've heard is a classic, and I love the Goucher family, so why not read about Adam Goucher and decide to love him even more? And then I also want to read the book by Pre. About Pre. I don't think Pre wrote it, and just because he was such a influential character to our running culture. Not too many books by women, so I don't know if they just haven't read them, or if there obviously are more books written by and about men. So I think that's something that will change in the future, but maybe in a couple months they'll have another podcast about women in running besides Dina Castor. Moving on to hamstrings and heartstrings, Chris and I recorded last night, and we talked about our worst running decisions. And we also talked about Nicolas Cage for a little while, so stay tuned. My worst running decision stems from when I was running races for the wrong reason, and Chris's worst running decision sort of, he speaks about doing things or not doing things like sleeping that prevent him from getting out the door the next day. This actually reminded me of my interview with Fred Merlot from the Cultra Trail podcast, where he talked about his run streak. And one time he had to do a run after consuming a copious amount of birthday drinks in Florida. Probably not the greatest decision, but I mean, he's a streaker, so runners, we do silly things. Chris and I also bond over the troubles fig bars have given us during races. Yes, sometimes they're great, sometimes just not so good. And then we end the show always with our food segment, where Chris shames me for my use of Greek yogurt, but then he makes up for it, giving me a couple good ideas for my breakfast burritos this week. So it was pretty solid. Running Inside Out, Chris informed me he did drop a podcast actually yesterday, right before we recorded, and it's with the guys from Run the Desert in Arizona. I haven't listened to it yet, but Chris said it was really fun to talk to them, and now I gotta check out that podcast, so can't complain. Life is Trail Running sent me a link to their new video called No Man's Land, and it's a return of the power couple behind Life is Trail Running. They travel to the Tug Hill Plateau, and they make their own trails on their family land. So, great video. Check it out. The Trail Running Film Festival was last week. I know a bunch of us caught it, and it was great. I think my favorite one was I loved the runner bean. That was great. It was funny and approachable, but I also really liked the one with all the women with Myrna, and I really appreciate Myrna and Anna Frost, and who was the third woman? Someone shoot me. She started Trail Sisters, and she is great because I read the Trail Sisters blog. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Anyway, all the films were really great, but not much East Coast representing. So I hope that the next one, which is actually June 6th, will have maybe a couple East Coast films. I don't know if there's just nobody submitting anything or what it is, but yeah, come on East Coast. We got some great stuff out here. So start putting together some of your own films and maybe we can submit something one year. So some media coming out from the Trails Collective YouTube channel itself besides this here news show. Ian reviews the Ultimate Direction Hydro and Skin Shorts. I enjoyed watching this video because I don't really like to wear gear. I don't really like to buy gear that is tested by men because I am not a man. I'm a woman, not a small man. However, the layout of the shorts reminds me of the Saucony Bullet shorts, which are my favorite racing shorts. So I think I'm going to have to ask Ian if I can test them out a little bit, and then I'll let you ladies know how I like it. I put out a video with Wesley Atkinson, who won the Eastern States 100 last year. I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, right after he completed supported by his family, 100-mile ultra from his house in Pennsylvania, and he went around 13 hours. So this kid is going to give Jim Walmsley a run for his money. So check that out. That's on the channel now. And then I just found this. I was not in the loop, but I'm so glad because we now have a Coach's Corner with Jay Freeman of the Pain Cave podcast. So if you heard me a couple of seconds ago rave about how smart Jay is, now you can listen to some of Jay's advice on our YouTube channel. Jay has a great podcast and he has a very intelligent view of science in regard to runners. He's a PhD. In this episode, he talks about exercise physiology for runners, including parameters that are relevant to runners. He'll take you through a little bit of like this physiological metrics that are critical to your capacity in running, VO2 max, other markers that are just buzzwords, but he will really break it down and tell you exactly what that means for you and how you can try and improve these markers in your training if you want to. And with that, a lot of words, but that's our media for the week. And back to you, Ian.
Thank you, Ellie. And regarding the Pain Cave episode on the best books, I didn't get a chance to listen to that full episode yet. I'm actually interested in doing so. But just weighing in, I think one of my favorite books of all time, in case anybody's interested and needs some light reading, is Running with the Legends. Not necessarily a trail-related book, and it's going back a little bit from Michael Sandrock, but it's pretty awesome. It takes you through some pretty legendary runners. It really gives you a personal snapshot of who they were, where they came from, gives you some of their bests as well as some of their training routines and some of their really core workouts. And I just think it's a great book. So Running with the Legends by Michael Sandrock. And we started a thread with Jay and a couple other friends on whether maybe we could come out with an updated version of that and maybe even apply it to the trail world. So nothing like taking on a little bit more than I can handle at the moment, but we'll see if that goes anywhere. So what's up in the week ahead? May 16th, this weekend, Cole Crosby is back at it in New Jersey. He's going to take a shot at establishing an FKT on New Jersey's 77-mile DNR Canal towpath, and with funds again going toward the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund. His goal is to get through that 77 miles in between 9.5 and 10 hours. And the plan to start off at a cruising 7:30 pace for the first half and then just lay out whatever he's got in the tank. So long as he doesn't start taking in Gatorade in the later miles, I think he's got a shot. And just a reference there, a number of years ago when Cole was living here in Ithaca and working some for me, he went after an indoor 50K record using the Ithaca College indoor track. I can't remember. It might have been a mark set by Wardian. And I think that he was on pace to get the record, but with like a mile or 2 miles or something like that to go, he switched over into Gatorade, which didn't go well at all. And so we probably got some still quality booting marks around the Ithaca College track to this day. But in any case, he's going after it. Check it out. You can follow him on a Strava beacon, but look him up, Cole Crosby. Go into a good effort, and good luck, Cole. On the virtual event front, some continue to kick with Athletic Equations. Happily Running is continuing to do their event where they're trying to basically fill every hour or every segment in May on a virtual run. So look up Happily Running and check progress there. 2 events with registration, I think, happening now. One registration will be open until May 24th, and it's Ryan Williams Ramshackle Running Solo 6. Wait a minute, I'm backing it up here. Ryan, who did I just say was... Who just set that time? Oh, yeah, no, that was... Bear with me here. Who did I just say set that? Ryan Williams. Dude, I know that name sounded familiar. Are you the one who just set this new mark in the on the Nautchaug Ridge Trail? Dude, I almost just did a whole interview with mentioning maybe you twice and didn't put it together that you're potentially this person. So if one and the same, Ryan, I'll follow up with you on the Facebook message because it would be good to connect with you more and find out a bit more about what you're up to. So back to it. In any case, Ryan Williams, in which case the wicked speedy maybe Ryan Williams, putting on the Ramshackle Running Solo 6. Just wanted an opportunity to create an event and invite friends and run it with friends. And so here comes another virtual event. It'll be a 5K loop starting and ending at your door. The event's totally free and encouraging donations to a charity of your choice or the runner's choice. And with Ryan being from North Central Mass, so this does make sense that this is one and the same. The winners get giant cookies from Christo's Wicked Good Cookies, who we mentioned in a couple episodes ago as well. So that's a pretty sweet deal. For all those that haven't had the Christo's Wicked Good Cookies, they're pretty wicked good. So you should probably just sign up to get yourself through 6 hours and earn yourself a cookie. There's detailed description at the Google form that we'll link in the show notes for a Google registration. And that's at the blog ramshacklerunning.com/solo-6. It's ramshacklerunning.com/solo-6. So good luck with that event, Ryan. And for sure, thanks for reaching out to us and letting us know. May 25th and the week after, the Hudson Valley's Steve Estramaras, his entity Conquer the World Endurance, is putting on the virtual ultras with 50, 100, and 200-mile options. And you can do that in either one shot or over the course of 7 days or however you want to cover that. $10 entry fee goes to support the First Responders Children's Foundation's COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund. You can register an ultra sign-up up until May 24th, and with the event beginning or commencing on May 25th. So check that out. This coming week, it'll be, I think, the third showing of Aaron Stredney's Trail Trivia night. So check in with the Trails Collective Facebook page, 8 p.m. Trail Runner Trivia, and see if you can win yourself some toilet paper. Let's see what else is going. I didn't get a chance. I mentioned it last week, but I didn't get a chance to put up the review on the Topo Mountain Racer. Not necessarily a new shoe, but probably one that many of you are not familiar with. So that review will be coming this week, as well as one on the Ultraspire Momentum V1 race vest. The V2 is going to come out sometime, I think, this summer. But the V1, a really slick vest. This is one that we'll have on the online store that'll go live this week. And I reached out to a couple individuals to review some of the Ultraspire products, just friends. One is Jim Lampman. Maybe plug a clip of his review here on what's coming. Many of you may know Jim. I think he's probably finished more 100-mile races than probably everybody listening to this video cast combined. I think he finished 9 100s in 2019 alone. So I think he's got like 135 races in his Ultra sign-up record book there, and a lot of them like 100-milers. We go back. He was one of my streakers, or one of the only ones to at least start every one of the Virgil Crest 100-milers. I think Leo O'Connor was maybe my only, I think the only one to finish every year, if I remember right. But in any case, we go back a bit. So check out Jim's review. He's somebody that definitely puts a ton of time into his packs. He knows his gear. And so a lot of good advice coming there. So that's what's coming. I'm going to take it back to Ellie here. She's going to plug an interview coming this Friday. So we're going to try to, if we can, release interviews with runners every Friday. We'll see if we can keep that going, and she'll cue you into who's coming this Friday. So thanks for tuning in with us this week. We'll be back this time next week. For sure later in this week, please check out trailscollective.com as we'll launch it. No doubt there'll be some kinks to work out, but show us a little love, engage in some of the threads there, and let's build this thing together. So Ellie, take it out.
Hey Trails Collective, we're going to end the show today with a little bit from Lori and look for the full video on Friday.
Was first overall, and that was the prizes were first male, first female, no distinction of overall, which is whatever, that's fine.
Yeah,
and that was a course record too.
I mean, that's how it should be, I think.
Me too, and Phineas would agree with you, like, yeah. Or maybe not even, he'd be like, no, just whoever wins. But so
when he grows up and understands a little bit more about anatomy and physiology, he might change his mind. But I like the sentiment. He believes in his mom. That's what it is.